Anyway,
Right.
let's get to our other guest real quick before we get to that.
Okay.
Sir, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, what you do for a living.
Yeah, my name is Holden Russell. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. Grew up just about everywhere, though. Show it, yeah. And I'm the author and illustrator of The Freight Train in the Sky, which is just a children's book. So on the civilian side, I'm in IT, so I work in tech with a company called Custom Inc. And then I work M-Day with the National Guard as well as a public affairs specialist.
Respect.
Thank you, appreciate it. I wrote this book, I think right at the beginning of the pandemic. I got furloughed from my company, and I just had before I ended up going on COVID orders, I had 1 month where I wasn't doing anything, and I was pretty panicked. And I was just man, I gotta make money, I gotta do this. My wife works in healthcare, so she was, out working every day, and I felt like I needed to do something. So I just wrote this book, and I just sat down and I knocked it out, and I did it, and I couldn't believe it because I've been working on this one book for the last 16 years.
That's what I was gonna ask. Is that your first book?
Yeah, so this is my first published book.
Wow.
My first published story was in 2019. I wrote, it was just a personal essay that got published on a literary magazine online, and then I had a poem published in a book at the beginning of 2020.
Nice. Have you been writing for a long time?
Yeah, so the book I've been working on forever, and it's the reason I'm getting my master's degree, is I've been writing that since I was 16. The first draft I wrote was 16 years old. I was in high school. And I just I wrote it, and it was inspired by my dad because my dad was deployed when I came up with the first idea of it. And I just started writing, and I've been rewriting it over and over again, which is funny because this book I wrote in 3 weeks.
Wow.
And it was quick, and it was fast. And I didn't think it was possible to write something that quick. So I finished it, and I was just this is actually this is kind of good. And then I had other people read it, and they were wow, you got something there. We should start working towards it. So then I worked as an artist for 5 years with Custom Inc.
Okay.
So I was a graphic designer with them before I moved to the tech side of things, and I just I learned how to do digital art. So I illustrated it, and it came together, and it happened so fast that I was wow, this is this is something that I can put out there now. I don't have to wait. Well, my other book I've been waiting forever. So
is the other one a children's book as well?
So the other one's a young adult novel, which is it's a little different. It's longer. I want to get the genre that I'm in it's called young people's literature. Okay. Essentially, it's anything from picture books to young adult.
Okay.
And it covers a long range of things. So obviously, picture books are going to be mostly illustrations with minimal text. But the text, usually with a children's book, you have to have a lesson in all your stories. So the character has to learn something. The character has to develop something, and it has to be something that is essentially morally right. And then you have early chapter books, which is a transition. So this is going to be ages. Usually 8 to 12 are going to really enjoy this because there's pictures in it, but it is a chapter book. So you're kind of graduating from picture books into chapter books.
Right.
Which is really exciting.
I wanted to know if the Pajama Pals over there got any questions for you.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Do you have any questions? Because we've read chapters 1 through 3. We're actually going to start chapter 4. And so if that's the chapter
I'm reading today.
You guys reading together?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that. I have
We're gonna have a book reading, and he's gonna give you some background.
All right, Mr. Holden Russell, go ahead and lead us into what we're about to witness here.
Yeah. So The Freight Train in the Sky is a book about a young orphan. His name is Paul, and he lives in an orphanage, and he really just loves the stars. And he reads this book called Adventures into the Great Unknown, and essentially what it is, it tells the stories of the constellations. So when he looks up to the sky, he sees constellations and the way they move, and he always sees them as families. And since he doesn't have a family of his own, he finds that solitude with the stars.
Right.
So in the first chapter, what Paul does is he looks at the stars and he's watching them, and a shooting star shoots across the sky, and he wishes upon it. And he wishes to ride the same tracks that the stars ride every night. And so what happens is a freight train comes out of the sky, and it picks him up, and it takes him into the sky. And now he's going through the different train cars on an adventure, and he's experiencing a real life adventure with the constellations. So in the second chapter, he meets Orion the Hunter and Hercules, who he helps battle a Hydra with. And those are three very popular constellations, but they're also very popular Greek mythologies. And then in the third chapter, he meets Jason and the Argonauts, which is actually the Argo, which is the ship that the Jason and the Argonauts are on, is the largest constellation in the sky. And they actually had to break it into 5 or 6 different other constellations in order to make up what the boat is. And that's the second chapter. That's the third chapter. So what we're going to be reading is the fourth chapter after he's already gone on those adventures. And the fourth chapter is called The Roar in the Colosseum.
All right.
Yep.
Amazing.
So do you guys have any questions for him about the book or the story or how he wrote it?
Do you know how you came up with the book?
Yeah, interesting enough, I've always been interested in constellations and astronomy and all those things. And I've always loved it. I love writing them. And when I was in undergrad, I used to write all of my poems were based off of Greek mythology, which was really kind of how I got into it. And then I was reading the Chronicles of Narnia, and I was reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And in C.S. Lewis's dedication, he dedicated the book to his, I believe it was his nieces, I'm not sure, but it was a very beautiful dedication, and I thought it was so sweet. And then my nieces had just been born at that same time, and I thought I would love to write a story and dedicate it to them. And the way I spoke in here was very similar to the way that C.S. Lewis spoke in the Chronicles of Narnia, and that was like kind of my inspiration for it. Was I wanted to write fairy tales that included Greek mythology, and I just think Greek mythology it's just really interesting, and I'm happy I can make a children's book out of it.
It's great.
I've never been around somebody that has something published. Real quick before we get you out of here, when the copy of one of these, the finished product, got into your hand, describe that feeling.
Oh man, it's surreal. It is. It's you get it and you see something that you've been working so hard on. And I think the first time, I think it was my first sold copy. I have the first sold copy that I got because when I published it, I wanted to buy it one time just to test it to make sure that everything was good.
Yeah.
And when I held it, I just looked at it and I was like, this is when if I went back in time and told 16-year-old self me that you would be holding a copy of your published book, he wouldn't believe me.
Right.
And I think that's the craziest thing is as I held it, I was just like I could see this lifelong dream come true. But I think the greatest part was I didn't feel sad. I felt kind of excited because I was like, this is just the beginning of so much. Like, this is going to go on my shelf, and it's going to be one of many that I'm going to do in the future.
Right.
And I think that was just like, it was just something I've always dreamed of, and I was so happy when I first got it. It was incredible.
Nice.
So if you can give the kids any advice, what would it be?
Oh, man, it's just do what you love. I think the thing is, people who want to be artists, just do it. Like, I don't know. I think when I was in high school, I didn't read, I didn't draw, I didn't do anything in high school.
Yeah.
I just started playing around with stuff, and if I had a story, I wrote it down. If I had a song, I wrote it down. If I had anything, I wrote it down. And I just kept doing it, and eventually, you start looking back at the stuff you made, and you're impressed by it, and you're like, wow, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
I just keep doing this. And it's putting in work. There's this guy named Roger Reeves, if you guys look him up. He's a poet. He's a fantastic guy. He came to VCU a few years ago. And I went to him and I handed him a book of poetry and I had him sign it. And I asked him, what's the trick? How do you do it? And he told me, write. He's like, that's it. He said, writers write. And be able to take the lumps as they come. But all you got to do is if you have a trade, if you have a skill, if you have anything, keep doing it. Because the thing that you think you're not that good at now, you might be master at later.
That's none of that. Yes, we appreciate you coming out. Ladies and gentlemen, the author of The Freight Train in the Sky, Mr. Holden Russell. I am changing.